I would like to also thank the Faculty of Public Affairs and Dean Plourde for their support with the organization of this event. Thank you all again for this conversation, for participating in this conversation about philanthropy. So our master's and diploma program in philanthropy and nonprofit leadership prepares graduates to be innovators in the sector, whether they work in charities, nonprofit organizations, advocacy organizations, social enterprise, and beyond. We are aiming to have people build change. And so the conversation today will be really key in promoting the goal of our school and the goal of this program. We are already finalizing, or final, our fourth cohort in the program already, so time flies by. And in sport, today we address two important trends in two panels in the PhilanthroThink. So the first panel will tackle the idea behind horizontal and collective philanthropy. So people coming together to help each other. We are particularly interested in giving circles, which are not necessarily new, but they are increasingly popular nowadays. Giving circles are groups of individuals who donate money, time, or talent, and pool their resources together to decide afterwards how to distribute them. They are often grassroots or formed around specific causes, but we can also see them global in scope. The second panel considers the evolving relationship of social investments, by which contributors expect both a social and a financial return to more traditional philanthropy. So let me introduce the first panel. We have the pleasure of having Professor Angela Eikenberry, who is joining us via Skype after some travel woes. So thank you so much. She is a professor at the School of Public Administration at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Angela is the leading international scholar of giving circles, having done recent research in the UK as well as in the US. She is the author of Giving Circles, Philanthropy, Voluntary Association, and Democracy. So we really appreciate her valiant efforts of trying to be here in person, but yet still joining us via Skype. We have Daniel Tisch, is President and CEO of Argyle Public Relationships, one of Canada's largest and most respected independent public relation firms, and former Vice President of Environix Communications. Daniel is also founding partner and co-chair of Social Venture Partner Toronto. SVP is the largest global network of engaged donors, over 3,500 in 39 countries.
39 cities.
Cities, typo. We have Dr. Nathan Grassi, who will moderate this panel. Nathan is the most recent faculty hire here at the Program of Nonprofit Leadership. Nathan's research focuses on governance, financial, and strategic management of nonprofits. His recent article on modern financial portfolio management for art organizations breaks new grounds in this field, my colleague. Then we have Jessie Cressman Dickinson, is first of all Carleton alumnus, so with a Master's of International Affairs, and currently community manager and advisor on community relations, City of Ottawa, as well as community catalyst with the Hub, and co-founder and board member of Just Change Ottawa. Just Change was started mainly by graduate students in public administration and international affairs at Carleton when they were students, and now is a national network of change makers, literally. We also have Kasia Polanska, She is a graduate of her public administration master's, and as a student was a LEAF Scholar Innovation Scholar, a LEAF Social Innovation Scholar. She is currently a senior consultant, Interest Consulting, and co-founder and board member of Just Change Ottawa. So I will ask my colleague Nathan Grassi to take over. Thank you.
I think we're lucky today because we've got the opportunity to learn about giving circles, and we've got a top scholar and also some people from the community who are doing cutting-edge work in the field. So it's a great opportunity to learn about both the academic side and the practitioner side related to giving circles and what's happening in philanthropy. I think it makes sense for us to start by thinking about the academic side and ask Angela to lead off and giving us an update about what's happening in the scholarship on giving circles.
Thank you for having me here, virtually there. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it. So I wanted to just give a little overview, and I'm feeling a little bit disconnected from you all. So can you shake your heads or raise your hands if you can hear me okay? And you, maybe, okay. Any of you are in giving circles besides the panelists that are? Is anyone in the audience on a giving circle or been participating in a giving circle? Let me tell you about my definition. Maybe that will open things up a little bit. When I talk about giving circles and the research that I've done, I'm really looking at people who get together and then pool their resources and decide together where to give those away. And resources, usually money, sometimes time. And what's important about these groups, too, is there's usually an engagement component where people are also learning. There's a social aspect to these groups. And they're very much community-oriented, kind of grassroots in nature. But they really also do span the shapes and sizes by which they come together. I think what's really important about these groups, too, is that they're typically independent of any particular charity or social enterprise. So they're groups of people who are independently looking at different charities and groups to support, and then deciding together where to give those support. So really a do-it-yourself kind of philanthropy. Oh, I can see myself now up there. So my research, I've been trying to understand what kind of models, why people are participating in these groups, and what the impact has been on members as well as beneficiaries. And so I just want to maybe give you a little sense for what these groups are like, and then we'll give you an idea about how they operate. And I know the panelists will provide further case studies, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but just to give you a sense for what kind of people we're talking about and why people are participating. I'll give you a couple of examples of groups that I've studied. One is a group started by Adam Pike and Michael Harris, who are in London, and they started a group called the Young Philanthropy in 2011. They've since changed their name to Beyond Me. And Beyond Me is essentially a network of giving circles, or giving teams, as they call them. And Adam and Michael, they're young professionals. They were just starting at Deloitte and PwC around the time before they started Beyond Me, and wanted to do something to be more engaged in their giving. They didn't feel very satisfied writing a check or doing direct debit or giving on Just Give to sponsor a friend. They wanted to be more engaged. They wanted to be more effective in their giving, and they wanted to try to bring other people along with them. So they started Beyond Me, which now is made up of about 100 teams of giving groups, each team affiliated with a particular or housed at a corporation or business. The teams are made up of a leader who then recruits 6 of their other young professional colleagues to be on the team. And then together they select a charity or social enterprise to work with over the course of the year, providing pro bono help and then also giving money to the charity or social enterprise, about £3,000 over the course of the year. So Beyond Me, since they've started in 2011, estimate they've given around £500,000 and 12,000 hours of business skills. So one main group that's really been attracted to giving circles have been young professionals, but then other kinds of professionals, not varying ages. Another example of a giving circle that emerged several years ago now is a group called Women Aid. or one group called Washington Women Aid that started in the early 2000s when Amy Kassoff, who was a doctor or physician working with homeless people, she was continually giving money to her clients to help them pay for rental bills, prescriptions, so on. And over time, she couldn't keep up and asked her friends to help out. And essentially, this group started with having a potluck every once in a while when all their friends would get together, pool about $35 each, and then they just collect this fund that then Amy would be able to provide funds to her clients, paying rent and so on. So that group, Washington Women Aid, there was an article done about them in Real Simple magazine in 2002, and that started or inspired 50 more groups to be created across the U.S. It also inspired Marsha Wallace to start Dining for Women, which is now a national network of more than 400 chapters across the U.S. in which women meet for dinner monthly, and the money they would have spent eating out, they put towards a fund that they target charities working around international development and serving women. So this Women Aid and Dining for Women are, I think, great examples of the expansion of women's giving through giving circles. We know through the research that Jessica Behrman's done in 2009, we're now working on trying to update our database of giving circles in the U.S. and to see what the numbers are like now. But when she did her original research, she found that over half the giving circles in the U.S. were made up of women-only groups. So in the U.S., we very much have thought of giving circles as women's groups. But interestingly, last year when I was doing research in the UK and trying to understand what the landscape looks like for giving circles there weren't so many women's giving circles. There were some, especially we found many in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and many of those women had learned about giving circles in the US and then brought them back. But there weren't so many. We also see in the U.S. many ethnic and race-based giving circles, so people of different groups, African American giving circles, Asian American giving circles, also some religious-based groups. Many Jewish giving circles, for example, exist in the U.S. There aren't so many, we weren't able to find so many of those ethnic, race-based, or religious-based groups in the U.K. There are some, but not many. So people are joining giving circles are really from a variety of backgrounds, but especially, as I noted, the young professionals, women in particular, and different race, ethnic-based groups. And why do people join these groups? I think the examples I gave give you a little bit of a sense for that people really want to be more engaged in their giving. They want to see more closely the impact of their giving, and through many interviews I've done and surveys, this kind of comes up over and over again. People want to be around other like-minded people. That's part of their inspiration as well. And then some people just want to be able to give, but they don't have a lot of time, so they want something that's easier, fun to do while they're participating. So there's a variety of reasons why people join, but they all sort of kind of hone around this idea of doing something a little differently and doing it in our own way. So they accommodate a lot of different kinds of ways that people want to be more active than simply writing a check or doing a direct debit. I could talk a little bit more about the impact of giving circles as well, but I wondered should I go on, or do you want to maybe make it part of a larger discussion? Because I know that Just Change is going to be talking about impact from their report as well. So I take your guidance.
Angie, if you wanted to talk a little bit more, I'm not sure if you can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. If you wanted to talk a little bit more about the research, and then if you wouldn't mind possibly taking a few questions, just because I know you can't stay with us for the entire time period today. Would that be okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Sure, I'd love to do that. So what about impact of these groups? I'll talk a little bit, I'll focus on the research I've done. We've done surveys in the US and in the UK now and trying to understand the impact of giving circles on members to try to understand, is it affecting giving, volunteering, and other engagement areas. And essentially what we found in our surveys that included Giving Circle members, and we also tried to include a control group of donors who are not in Giving Circles to be able to compare. And essentially what we found in the US and in the UK that Giving Circles do seem to be encouraging members to give more and give more strategically, especially around this idea of effectiveness or trying to be more effective in giving. In particular, last year in the UK, we found, for example, that Giving Circle members gave significantly more per month than similar donors who weren't in a Giving Circle. And about 3/4 of the members who we surveyed, Giving Circle members, said that their giving had increase. So there seems to be some pretty significant impact on level of giving and then how people are giving in a more engaged and trying to be in a more effective way, looking, for example, at their giving aligning with their goals and trying to give also in issues in areas that aren't traditionally funded by traditional philanthropy. We know from the research in the US in particular that people that are in Giving Circles are significantly more likely to be giving to areas such as supporting women and girls and in giving to ethnic and minority groups than other donors who aren't in Giving Circles. So there seems to be a sort of expansion of giving going on to areas not traditionally funded by philanthropy. Even when we controlled for different demographics of the people that are participating. So another kind of important aspect to Giving Circles is that it enables people to come together and participate together in their philanthropy. So there is a sort of democratic participation element to these groups that the members are deciding together where they focus their time. They have discussions about issues and areas in the community that they're trying to address. So it provides education to members. One of the biggest impact that came out of the survey is the learning that goes on for members, but learning how charities operate, for example, and understanding about issues in the community. So the learning aspect is a really important impact that seems to be part of this Giving Circles process as well. And of course, learning just how to do philanthropy, how to do grant making or give away money. We also found that about half of the members surveyed in the US and the UK said that they increased their volunteering as a result of participation in a Giving Circle. And that's volunteering partly with the Giving Circle, but external to the Giving Circle as well. And with some groups, there's an important professional development aspect to that, which I think the panelists will talk about a little bit more probably later as well. We also found that about 2/3 of the members of Giving Circles in the US said that they had increased their efforts to address problems in the community, and about half said the same thing in the UK. So there is sort of this looking beyond the Giving Circle to try to understand how Giving Circles, beyond the money, beyond the time, or how is it impacting people to be more involved in their communities? It seems that there is some impact there. Now, to what degree that extends to people actually being involved in trying to change policies and policies, government policies, for example, one of the survey questions that we asked in the US and in the UK was about to what degree did being in the Giving Circle inspire people or encourage them to expand their efforts to change government policy. And in this area, we didn't see so much impact. And so partly that makes sense. The Giving Circle is not necessarily created to do that kind of advocacy work, but with many of the issues and areas that Giving Circles are focused in, there is an element of trying to make something better, right? And so understanding the degree to which these groups can lead to change, larger change that would affect the areas and issues that they're working on. I think it is an important area to continue. We're going to continue to look at. At this point, giving circles in the U.S. and in the U.K. Seem to have little impact on participation in this policy change area or in participation in kind of political activities. There's not a big difference between the Giving Circle members and the people who aren't in Giving Circles. So that will be interesting to keep watching to see what happens around that area. But certainly these groups seem to be having some impact around giving, volunteering, and just general engagement in the community. I think I'll stop there and see if you have questions.
Angela, because of time constraints, maybe I could just ask you one question, because I think we're going to hear a lot about what's happening in Canada that might be novel in this area. Is there anything from your research or anything that you're picking up anecdotally in the U.S. that's an emerging trend in this particular area?
Yeah, well, some of the things that seem to be going on, and hopefully we'll be doing more new research in the coming year about this, as well as many Giving Circles increasingly are participating in larger networks of Giving Circles. And this wasn't happening so much in the U.S. in our previous research. Most groups were kind of independent, people that were sitting around the kitchen table, or if they were larger, more formal groups, they were still kind of independent, maybe sometimes affiliated with a community foundation who would be providing them some support as a fiscal agent, maybe some additional support. But now we're seeing emerging these networks of Giving Circles in the U.S. There's a group called Amplifier that's connecting up all these Jewish Giving Circles. The Asian Americans in Philanthropy have created a network of Asian American Giving Circles. And so that seems to be an expanding area. And then in the UK too, it seems that many of the groups are forming in these kind of networks. So that's going to be interesting to see what kind of effect those networks have on these groups. Does it even magnify even more, perhaps, some of the impact on the members and provide them a way to leverage resources and so on? That's a main one. Other online giving too is online Giving Circles are emerging, and we haven't done any research really on what the implications are of meeting online virtually as opposed to in person, which a lot of these groups have been the main focus. Those are, I think, the two big ones that we're trying to integrate into our upcoming research, where we're also trying to look again at more at the impact these new changes are happening. There's new models emerging, or at least new models that they're going on in the UK that haven't been so much operating in the US, such as the Funding Network. Probably some of you have heard of that group before. They're based in London, and they have this event-based model of giving where charities come and pitch projects to people who attend, and then they have an auction-like format where people pledge to give to those projects. And the Funding Network model is really spread around the UK, and they've just started a group in New York. I think there's been a group in Toronto for a while. So those are kind of new models, emerging new twists in the way that these groups are being used that will be interesting to see the impact on the members.
Okay, thanks a lot. Because of time constraints, I don't think we'll be able to open it up to the audience to question you, Angie. I know you've got to move along, but really wanted to thank you for your participation today and for contributing to the forum on Giving Circles. So we really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And I think what we'll do now is proceed through the rest of our panel. We're gonna have a little bit of time for each one of our practitioners, and they'll let you know what's going on. And then we'll have some questions among the remaining members of the panel, and then we'll turn it over to the audience and proceed. And maybe, Daniel, I could ask you to talk first.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you, all of you, for joining us today, and thank you to Carlton for the invitation. I had the pleasure of meeting Susan Phillips, I guess about a year and a half ago, when you came to Toronto and talked about the program and about trends in philanthropy. And for me, it was, if you know the movie Jerry Maguire, it was one of those you had me at hello moments, where I thought, what an amazing program, what amazing leadership that this university is showing. I'm on the board of Queen's University, and I'm kind of like, why can't we do that sort of thing, right? So it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and it's great that you're showing this kind of leadership. I guess to talk a little bit about social venture partners, which is something I'm very passionate about, I guess I want to take you back to another you had me at hello moment for me, and that was when I first heard about SVP. It was a little under 10 years ago. It was actually 2007, and I was just stepping off a couple of nonprofit boards at the time. My profile was that of kind of being a serial volunteer. I had served on a lot of boards, and as my consulting business was becoming larger, I found myself writing bigger checks. But I never felt that I was really being truly strategic with my philanthropy. In fact, I wouldn't even have used the word philanthropy to refer to myself, or philanthropist. Philanthropist, that's Bill Gates or Rockefeller or Carnegie, somebody like that. It's not me, right? And then at the time, there was no Social Venture Partners affiliate in Toronto. It was in a number of U.S. cities. It started in Seattle in 1997. And I had a meeting with somebody who was really interested in bringing this model to Toronto and is looking for people who might be interested in being founders or co-founders. And when I heard about it, it was just, the penny just dropped, and I said, this is so powerful. The idea that by pooling the money and the time and the talent of individual citizen philanthropists, we could achieve so much more together and have so much more fun than any of us could have on our own. And so that idea of having greater impact was so compelling and so interesting and so powerful to me. And it really was one of those moments where it was, you had me at hello, because I loved the model. Not everybody falls in love with the model. It was great hearing Angela's talk about the different motivations that people have. Some people do it for social reasons. Some people do it because of the areas of focus that a giving circle may choose. In our case in Toronto, we chose to focus on investing in the capacity of building charities that reduce or prevent poverty, right? So we had a very deliberate choice. But one of the incredibly interesting things about Social Venture Partners as a movement is that it really is a network, and the strength of a network is in the nodes, right? There's no central organization saying thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt. Every individual SVP affiliate decides on its own what its primary giving focus is going to be. So what's unique about SVP? A few things. I mean, it's certainly not do-it-yourself philanthropy or do-it-yourself nonprofits, right? We are selecting and investing in money, time, and talent in established charities where we think there's a real fit between our skills and their need. And you note I don't say our money, because in the end, while we're giving anywhere between $5,000 and $30,000 a year, typically, in Toronto anyway, to different charities, in the end it's not that much money, right? What's way more valuable is the consulting time of the people that we have in our partnership, right? So if the charity needs help and support in governance or in finance or in operations, or if it's a social enterprise, as has been the case a couple of times in sales and business development, we'd likely have people in our partnership who have those skills. And we try to focus on training our partners to be really effective in that consulting and to approach it with a certain sense of humility and real partnership, because there's always a risk that people, particularly in the private sector, come at it with a sense of, oh, we know best, right? And so the wonderful thing about the sort of people who are attracted to SVP, it tends to be people who are genuinely interested in learning and approach it with a certain amount of humility. So that's one thing that's kind of unique about it. The second thing is that it really is, as I said earlier, it's about local choice. Every individual affiliate chooses its own focus. And that can be a little messy at times, right? Because it might be easier to inculcate collaboration across the SVP network, which is 39 cities and 8 different countries. If we had one giving focus, it might be easier to get grants from foundations if we had one focus, but we don't, right? But that's part of what makes it beautiful too. The third thing is that we focus on better charities, helping do good better, helping charities be better by investing in their capacity. And we also invest in making people better philanthropists. But in some ways, those aren't two different lines of business. They're really one, because we see one as inextricably connected to the other. We believe that if we make people better and smarter and more strategic philanthropists, they are going to do better work, right? And so that's something that I think is really unique about it, and that's really where the magic happens. And it's been around now since 1997, and we're doing better at collecting network-wide data. And I'll just give you a couple of facts from the research we've done internally among the 3,500 partners across our network in those 39 cities. It's been shown that 72% of partners surveyed, they've increased their total giving since they joined SVP. So not just to SVP, but to all charities. They're giving more strategically. So 95% report that they've become more proactive and mission-driven. 83% are interested in funding nonprofit infrastructure. 75% are finding themselves collaborating with other donors. And that's really fundamental to our model. It's not competitive, it's collaborative. We see ourselves as additive. We want to grow the total philanthropic engagement and involvement, not take it away from other charities. Partners are more involved in their community. More than 60% say there's been an increase, and about half of those say a significant increase in their volunteering and their awareness of community affairs and in the way they're leveraging resources. And the other interesting research, as we're doing it longitudinally over time, is that we're finding that the longer a partner is involved in SVP, the greater the changes in all three of these outcomes. And so in terms of some of the trends we're seeing now, I mean, now that we've been around for a while, we're really starting to think much more as a network, right? And Angela referred to some of that and some of those challenges, right? Because we started in the US and Canada. In Canada now we're in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Waterloo. And by the way, we'd love for Ottawa to be our 40th city, that milestone number 40, if anyone here is interested. And in some cases, though, it's been tricky because we didn't really have a strong brand as a network. But now we're starting to think, okay, the most important thing we can do is strengthen those local nodes, right? Have really strong local affiliates. But if we do that, then the question is, how can we get those affiliates to connect and collaborate with one another, sharing best practices, impact measurement tools and systems, training of philanthropists? How can we really share that to get better results and better impact? And then at the apex of kind of the pyramid in terms of impact is, what sort of collective impact could we have as a network on the philanthropic space in general? So those are a few things that we're thinking about on the international board right now. But it's kind of like, a phrase that's inspired a lot of us is the famous quote by Victor Hugo, "There's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come." And for me, that's really very much symbolic of what Social Venture Partners is all about. It really is looking at how we can be more effective together than we can be alone. That engaged philanthropy is something that people are really interested in today and can attract more people to philanthropy, particularly millennials. And we just think it's a really powerful model that could have a lot of impact in collaboration with so many other great change makers who are operating in the space in Canada and around the world. So thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. It's great to learn about Social Venture Partners and what you're doing. I think it might be best now to just kind of contrast that with another organization. So we've got Jesse and Kasia, who are both going to talk just for a little bit about Just Change. And Jesse is going to start by introducing us to the organization. And then Kasia is going to talk about the impact of the organization, because they've just produced a report which helps them identify how much of an impact they've had in the community. So I'm just going to turn it over to them for a little while.
Great, thanks. So I am part of Just Change Ottawa. It's part of an organization that we founded. We have 12 board members, Kasia being one of them, and we've got 2 others in the audience with us today who are on the next panel. So we're slowly taking over panels in Ottawa. So the 12 of us each pool our funds. We put $50 into a pot, and that gives us $1,000 to give to a great idea for social and environmental change in the city of Ottawa. So does anybody here have a great idea for the city? Anybody? Because you still have a few days left to apply. Our application is open now until February 29th. Sorry?
At midnight.
At midnight, yes. We have an extra day this month. So when we start talking about Just Change, we get three major questions. What do you fund? Who do you fund? And why do you do this? So in terms of what do we fund anything. We're as broad as anything that will have social or environmental impact within the City of Ottawa. Who do we fund? We are legal structure agnostic. We will fund an individual, we will fund a for-profit, we will fund a nonprofit, we will fund a charity. We still haven't had any governments apply, but we're not opposed to it. I'm not sure how that would go around the board table, though. And so we came about almost 4 years ago now out of a real desire to solve some major problems that we saw in the funding space. The first was that we wanted programs and ideas that solve problems, not programs and ideas that fit into the checkboxes on funding forms. We wanted to be able to fund ideas, not proven concepts. And we wanted flexibility in funding, and we wanted to have dollars that could go to the people behind the ideas. So looking back now at kind of what we do and why we do it, there's definitely trends between us and what Angela was speaking about and social venture partners, and major connections to trends in millennial giving. And spoiler alert, we're all millennials. But then there's three main factors that I want to talk about. There are many trends in millennial giving, but these three that specifically speak to our model and what we've been able to achieve is the first. There's a sense of connection through this model. And this has been found that millennials want to have a personal connection to what they're funding. They want to be able to have and to see the impact of their dollars and their time. And that's another thing. It's not just dollars. You see this in the Just Change model through our Just Drinks event. So this is an event we host every 2 months for our grantees. And this allows us to not only meet them in person, which is so nice, but also to celebrate their idea, leverage our networks for their cause. And we bring everybody together to have fun, to have beers, to connect, and to learn about how we can help them further. And we use social media to do this, of course. That's our primary mode of communication. A second trend that you definitely see in millennial giving that applies to our model is, I call it a sense of adventure. Some people call millennials impulsive, but I prefer to put it in the box of adventurous. And that is that we see the potential of an idea and we weigh the potential of an idea over the potential risk of the idea when we make our funding decisions. And then the third factor that you often see is trust. So in this, it's trusting that the organization on the ground is the one who knows how to spend the money. They're best suited to make those decisions, and after you've decided to support this idea, we give our grantees the flexibility to make those decisions. And we're also not opposed to them using the money to fund themselves. We've dealt with this, Kasia, you've dealt with this, where you have a grantee who will come to you and say, we weren't able to spend the money, we just, something came up and we haven't been able to, and they're just relieved at us saying, it's okay. we trust that you know best when to launch your initiative, and we have the room for that. So in our own small but very scalable way, we've been able to create this model to address these problems, and the trends are definitely there. And we've been able to pilot a chapter in St. John's. And Kasia's going to speak a little bit more about the impact that we have, but I'll stop there for now.
Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is a question that you might have on your mind already. It's so what? So what that we do that? In the first 2 years, we started giving grants out, and we saw a lot of our grantees being very happy and very grateful. And we kind of thought about, like, who wouldn't be happy if we gave you $1,000? Everyone would be. So we started to think about, so what is actually the impact of Just Change grants? So the grants that we give have no strings attached. So basically, we don't require our grantees to report on what they did with the money, or how they spent it, or where it actually went, or whether it actually went anywhere, because sometimes the grantees hold on to the money for a period of time. So what we decided to do is to engage them in a conversation. So to ask them where they've been, what they've done, what they're planning to do, what are their suggestions about what we should do better as Just Change, and we also asked them what do they think the impact of the grant was on them. So that was probably the major reason why we wrote this impact report. And you'll see very quickly that it has 43 pages. So originally we thought that 5 pages, it's going to be great, short, but surprisingly we had a lot to say. So in the impact report, we talk about a number of things. We talk about partnerships, our community development, our communications presence, so social media and traditional media presence, how Just Change impacted us individually, but we also talk about the impact that we had on the grantees. And so when we engaged our grantees in a conversation, we had the first batch of 3 to 4 interviews. Very quickly, we realized that we not only accelerated the initiatives, we also created a lot of different impacts. So maybe acceleration, but in different shapes and different shades and colors for each and every single grantee. So I'll give you a couple of themes that we have identified. The first one is investment in assets. So what we were able to do is to give the grantees money to actually either purchase or improve their assets that they currently have. And the prime example of that is an organization called Compass, what are it called? Compass Center for Self-Directed Learning, there we go. And this initiative provides education to kids that do not thrive in traditional high school settings. So what they did with our money is they actually invested them in renovating 2 of their rooms, one for quiet study, one for collaborative work. And they actually did a couple of things with that money. So not only they renovated the space, they also gave the kids the ability to learn about project management, construction, and teamwork. So the kids were actually involved in renovating the space. Another thing that they actually did is they involved the community in that project. So it was kind of a triple whammy impact, if you can say, about that initiative. Another theme that we identified is community building, and it's very similar to what Compass Center did, but also, for instance, a campaign called Gotta Go campaign, which is the Ottawa-based community putting public washrooms in LRT stations. We gave them money and they spent them on communications advice and building their website so they can actually reach bigger community. Another theme that we created is power of networks. So this is not necessarily tied to the financial contribution that we do, but this is tied to our network, so the networks of 12 people, and the networks of people that show up at our Just Drinks event. So at the event, we give our grantees an opportunity to talk about what they need, what kind of skills and help and advice they need, and people get connected. There's a lot of exchange of information happening and exchange of skills. So that's another impact. And the last impact that I want to talk about, and it's probably my favorite, not only because I named it, but also because it makes me feel really good about what we do, is the pat on the back. It's that giving the sense of confidence and legitimacy to a lot of those grantees. So their legitimacy gets increased in the eyes of the community, but also in their own eyes. Very often they are supported by family and friends in the closest community, but having the 12 people, the 12 Just Changers, giving them money and saying, yes, we believe in you, that means the world to them, and that gives them a strength to go forward. So that's been very important. And one example that I wanted to bring up is Ottawa 123. It's an organization that is supporting ranked choice voting in municipal election. They said that before they got the grant, they were seen as a niche organization, one of those organizations that just comes and goes. But after we gave them a grant, they saw quite a lot of movement and quite a lot of support coming from the community and showing the community their current and potential value as well. So these are the 4 themes that we have identified in the impact report. If you want to read more stories about other grantees, in the back of the report we have stories about each grantee that we have covered in our impact report. This impact report covers only the first 2 years of our operations. Hopefully we will write another one pretty soon as well. So this is everything that I wanted to cover today, but if you have any questions about the impact report, about the other sections as well, very happy to answer these.
Well, great. Thanks so much. Maybe now we could take a little bit of time, and since we have 2 organizations here on this stage with different histories and recent experiences, we could see if there are any questions that you have for each other. Especially, Daniel, you've got a little bit longer history, and I wonder if there are some commonalities that you might see in their emerging organization.
Oh, I mean, I think it's incredibly exciting. And, you know, it's some of the things that both Jesse and Kasia were talking about, I think really resonate with me, right? The idea of investing in assets, right? You know, that's very much what we try to do as well. You know, the thinking about the power of networks, right? Helping, you know, a lot of it sometimes is helping the charities or the people, in your case, the people with ideas, to be more effective in telling their story, right? So it's getting more impact by giving them some sort of investment right now. And when you were talking about the confidence that they get, the pat on the back idea, that also resonates a lot too, because some of the most powerful types of consulting we do is we have a model where from within our partnership in each city, we strike a team that works with each investee nonprofit, right? And the head of that team is called the lead partner. And they're within our organization, they're the true heroes. It's not the people who run the board, it's the lead partners, because they're the ones who are actually, executing the mission. And often what they have to do is they have to form a really good relationship built on trust and value and accountability, mutual accountability with the executive director, right, of a particular charity, right? And so giving that executive director the skills and the confidence to be more effective when they're going to, pitch a donor or make a presentation to their board, right? Or make any critical decision that's going to invest in the future of their organization. That's a lot of what we focus on, and it's really exciting to hear you taking the same sort of approach.
Yeah, I'm really interested with the two models and that volunteer contribution approach and relationship building. It is very important to our model, but not formalized.
Yeah.
So we have, within the 12 of us, each time we collectively, we make our grantee decisions by consensus. Each time we come together and identify someone from our board becomes what we call their champion. So they're not somebody to watch over them. They're not someone who formally helps them, but they're their main point of contact and to help them connect to the board and to other networks if chosen. Yeah. It's not a requirement of the grantee. It'd be interesting to hear more about how you built in that volunteer or that formalized volunteer component into your model.
Yeah. Well, we didn't invent it, like the one of the things that's helpful about being part of a network is you start with some tools, right? So when SVP got big enough to actually have a network office in Seattle, it's very small and grassrootsy in feel. It's like 5 or 6 staff, right? So it's pretty lean, but they've become really good at helping to share knowledge across the network. And so they developed early on kind of SVP in a box, right? Which provides all sorts of tools to help start a social venture partners affiliate, and then to start doing the consulting, right? And so one thing we've gotten a lot better at in Toronto compared to our early days is bringing some level of consistency to the engagements we have with the nonprofits, right? Because there's real potential for, for failure there, right? Failing is fine, right? But because you learn from the failure, and we certainly had a few in the early days. But at the same time, it's only fair to nonprofits that want to work with us that we bring, that we're learning all the time and that we're applying better practices every time we have a consulting assignment. So it's become more formalized over time, and we have systems and procedures. And what we do is because we have a lead partner attached to each of the investees we have at any given time, those lead partners are also expected to collaborate with each other. And the other thing we'll do sometimes is we'll try to bring together the executive directors, right, from these different organizations. And they may not have much in common except that they're an SVP investee, but there can be value to them in building their own nonprofit network as well.
Interesting.
Hearing about that, Daniel, there seems to be in organizations sometimes a tension between stability and reliability and the ability to innovate and do things that are new. Have you done anything in the organization to try to maintain your innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because I think back to our first investment in 2008. We invested in a wonderful social enterprise in Toronto called Eva's Phoenix. So Eva's is a very well-known homeless shelter in Toronto, and Eva's Phoenix is a social enterprise, a print shop. And the idea is they take youth who are in the shelter system, get them ready to to learn a trade. They put them to work for a year in a commercial print shop, and the profits from that print shop go back into the homeless shelter. So it's a really powerful model. But what was interesting is we had a few different choices, right? Because like many giving circle type organizations, there's a pitch involved, right? So we have different organizations that pitch us, and we've tried to make that process valuable for each of the pitching organizations by giving each of them coaching as to how to, make the best possible presentation, helping them do a little bit of capacity assessment so they get value from the process, and then we choose one. But we were pretty risk averse the first time, right? Because we said, this is our first investment. We want to establish one that is not going to fail, right? So you guys, to your credit, you were more prepared to accept that risk, right? Or you are. And that's the risk for us, is that we cut ourselves off from innovative ideas. And so what we've tried to do is just incorporate make little subtle shifts in our focus over time. So while poverty is the focus, some years we've said we're going to focus this year on poverty among new Canadians, right? Another year it's poverty among youth, right? So like sometimes we've tried to narrow cast it a little bit. So that's one type of innovation. The other thing we tried last year is partnered with other funders, pooled our money together with other organizations and did a PhilanthroPitch competition, which was incredibly successful at the Mars building in Toronto. And, so again, that was something we'd never done before, but our risk was lowered a little bit because other SCPs had done it, and so we were able to learn a little bit from their experience.
I just wanted to continue on the theme of risk, and it is something that we want. It is something that we want to fund ideas, and ideas at that stage are risky. They're not proven concepts. But when the 12 of us are in the room making the decision, we find a pull to go to the safest. And we're fortunate enough to have, board members among us to say, hey, wait a minute. Like they check us, but there is this instant pull. And there's also when you have the pool of applicants, there's also so we do a one-page, very simple application. It sounds like you do verbal pitches.
It's both. No,
both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's often a lot of the ideas that we love them, they're fantastic, but they fall under the category of fundraising for an organization rather than acceleration for a new idea. And that's another thing that we struggle with, and fundraising tends to be a more safe bet. It's a more established organization, whereas accelerating the idea, it is risky. So it's important for us to have those people in the room who continue to flag. And that will be important as we try to grow. I mean, and Angela touched on this, the trend of networks giving circles, which you are and which we're trying to become, slowly but surely, St. John's and anywhere else. But it's, you have to make sure that the people within each circle have that same understanding about the risk. And you spoke about a SPP in a box. And I think it's going to be really important for us to identify what the just change in a box looks like.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, it's not only the people that keep us in check. 12 of us have very different experiences, different knowledge, and what we found very often is that there's always one person that will push us to think about something new, a new idea that we didn't know anything about. So that's also quite a lot of risk for us, sit in the room and suddenly change our minds completely. And initially what we do, we have a look at our applications ourselves, and we put a score next to them, and then we bring the top 5 applications and we start talking about them. But we have the option of if someone liked really one application and was in the top 5, they can champion it up and they can start a conversation. And it has actually happened a couple of times at the top 5, no interest after that one idea that someone brought and championed and said, guys, this is really important because of this and this and this, and you have to look at this, and we start having that conversation. We're pushing to open our minds and open our understanding of what these ideas are, and that's the beauty of it, that we're able to learn from each other and choose an idea that we didn't see anything in, but then after deliberation, after talking to each other, we actually found it very, very good to grant.
We've absolutely had that same experience, and you can't underestimate the power of just someone who gets passionate about a particular, potential investee, right? And some stuff that's correlated with investee success is so simple, like come with a client, have the client tell their story. Don't just come with the chair of the board, right? And that makes a huge difference. It's a small thing, and so we also hope that through the coaching process, we can help them be more effective at their own pitching. Another thing that I find is helpful is at the front end getting consensus among the members of the circle about, okay, what principles and values are going to guide our decision, right? And so if one of them is, hey, we're risk takers, well, then you can kind of, point to that, right? It's sort of, it can be informal or it can be more formal, but I think that can make a difference. We also try to learn from other SVPs, and so we have an international conference every October called Audacious Philanthropy, and this year it's in Los Angeles. And what we try to do there is really bring all sorts of innovative ideas from across the philanthropic world, to the conference so that people can pick up different ideas that they can take back home afterwards. So that can be really effective too. We're seeing a lot more interest in advocacy and collective action, impact investing, right? So SVPs, we're not there yet in Toronto. We're still one of the younger SVPs, but some of the more mature ones are definitely going into these other, spheres, and in some cases learning from mistakes. But that sort of innovative spirit is very much part of it.
Great. I think with that, it's probably good that we go to questions from the audience. So is our center mic here functional? Maybe if you could raise a hand, and then we'll use the mic at the center of the room if you've got a question. So I think that's the first hand that I saw.
Okay.
If you don't mind using the mic. Oh.
So as you grow as a giving circle, how do your infrastructure needs change, or your structural needs change, and how does that limit you or place restrictions on what you've been able to do when you were smaller, when you were first starting out?
So maybe
Go
I can
ahead.
speak to that because this is what we talk quite a lot about. Because we're not only a strict giving circle, we also do a lot of different things. Because people will come to us and say, "Hey, there's this awesome partnership that you can get involved with. Do you want to be a part of it?" So, for instance, we did a partnership with University of Ottawa. Sorry, Carleton, but they.
I didn't know we were allowed to say University of Ottawa.
Let's not start that trend.
So it's with their EMC Square project, where they work about transferring knowledge to nonprofit organizations. So what we did with them is a bunch of interviews to kind of learn about giving circles. And with them, we're actually creating a survey that we're planning to release in the near future to learn about millennials and their giving practices. So we started to do that. We also did the impact report, which 43 pages, it's very difficult to write, surprisingly. So there's a lot of things that we really, really want to do, but there are capacity issues. Like, we are all full-time professionals. We have jobs, we have families, we have our lives, but we want to really do something about this change and spread the word, go to different cities. We want to grow. We want to do a lot of things. So the capacity limits us. We work as much as we can, but there's always that time when you're like, okay, this might be a little bit too much. Let's just kind of prioritize and choose the things that will have the greatest impact on the community, and will definitely spread the word about our grantees and make our impact greater.
It's a great question, and when we started in December 2007, we were entirely volunteers, right? And I love that about it. That was actually something I loved, right? That it was very low cost from an administrative standpoint. And then we had our founding chair was she and I were going to the international conference for the first time in 2008, and she was saying, "I really think we need to have an executive director." And I resisted this. I was saying, no, I love this romantic idea of being, a group of hardy volunteers and, making our own decisions, and like a lot of donors, I'd kind of been trained to think that the lower the administrative cost, the better the charity might be, right? Which I no longer think, by the way. I resisted it, and then I went to the conference. And I just had to talk to enough people before I realized we absolutely have to get to a point where we have an executive director, because it just creates a step change in the professionalism and the capacity of the organization. And we're still constrained. We have one staff member, right? But sometimes you look at the cost of the model relative to the financial giving impact, and a typical donor might say, "Oh, I don't like this ratio at all," right? But when you think about it, there are so many things that we do that are really hard to measure but have incredible value, right? How do you put a value on the ability of an executive director to be more effective right? Or an organization to be better at sales, or finance or anything else. So, and the other point is, how do you put a value on having people be better philanthropists that give more to other causes, right? It's hard to measure, but we needed to invest in our own capacity.
Lama?
So thank you so much. It was a really interesting presentation and thoughts. My work looks at the issue of accountability. So I'm really curious about how your organizations understand accountability. To whom do you feel accountable, or to what? And the accountability of your impact as well. So.
I can start. So, I mean, I think that when we speak about trust, when I spoke about trust and how we're prepared for to be flexible and have the grantee make decisions about when they spend funding, how they spend their funding, that doesn't mean that they're not accountable for still doing the things that they said they were going to do to us. And so it's finding the balance for us between what is that? What is, so especially for us, because it's getting an idea, it's accelerating an idea. So at the end of the day, the idea might not get accelerated, and that's okay. We'd like for the grantees to continue to have conversations with us in the impact report and share with us why it was they didn't get there. You know, was it an environmental cause? Was it a financial cause? And so for us, it's yes, ideally, you do what you said you were going to do. We have flexibility for you to make that decision with how you do it. And if it doesn't come across, we want to know why. And so that we can share that through things like our impact report and learn from it.
And another thing, just to add to that, the impact that we reported in our impact report, it was really hard for us to kind of say, yes, we for sure did that. This is what our money did. We think that our grantees contribute to the impact that was created by these grantees. They're working hard with the money, and it's their impact, really. It's their creation. We just kind of helped them. We pushed them a little bit. We gave them resources to be able to do that. So, and we asked them, what do you think was our impact on you? We're not taking credit for any of this at all. We just want to share the story and show how we kind of give them that little push by patting them on the back so they move forward.
Yeah, yeah. It's another great question. Accountability is one of the kind of core values and principles of SVP, and I guess I'd say that we're accountable primarily to each other, within the group, because we're all equal partners, right? And we're not that big, you know what I mean? Like, we're about 50 people, right? So it's not that massive a group. That's in Toronto, right? Obviously, you add it up around the world, it's bigger. But because the focus is really local, it really is a group of people, almost entirely volunteers, with one paid staff member who's accountable to the board. But everybody else, it's really, are we doing what we said we would do? Are we being accountable to each other? Are we spending our collective funds and resources wisely? And the other layer of accountability is to our investees, right? So we recognize that there is an investment of energy and focus and effort that investees make in the relationship with us. And so it's really important to us that they get value from it. And as I said earlier, even if we don't end up choosing them as an investee, if they make our short list and they have to do all the extra work required to pitch, we want to ensure they get some value from that process.
Okay, I think we've got a mic out there.
I kind of have two questions, but maybe I don't have time for both. So one of them I'll start with, it sort of taps onto the accountability question. I'm really intrigued that such micro investments have such an impact and how you started to measure that. And also intrigued by the whole problem of upskilling nonprofit management. My experience with nonprofit management was well-meaning but clueless people with money, or people compensating for lack of experience in actual management with ego games and things like that. So it really holds down an organization when you have all of this kind of non-productive waste of energy going on. And so I'm really interested in your two different organizations over time as you build a body of knowledge of what kind of things work and what kind of investments work and what kind don't. How you capture that information for your successors on your board or for future successors, or how you begin to develop some kind of a sense of how to evaluate the investments that you're making.
Just to speak first to the first part of your question, sorry, there were a few, but it's $1,000 for us, which isn't a lot, but the $1,000 is a very small part of what the model then provides for the idea, and for a lot of our grantees, they are at the very early idea stage. And so it's about the Just Drinks event. It's about inviting our networks to participate and learn about this idea. It's about connecting them to new people with skills. So for example, I just got an email yesterday from one of our grantees from way back in, it was Compass, the same example Kasia provided, saying, hi, we have our space available for rent this summer. Can you share it with your networks? So that connection point then, even though this is completely outside of the scope of the grant, it keeps going on because we've now built a network around this idea and a community of people who are excited about this concept and want it to succeed. And in terms of tracking it, it's really, you raise a really important point because the ideas that we fund are so different. We haven't yet been doing it long enough to be able to put them in boxes of types of ideas, to be able to compare them across one another, and I'll defer to Kasia to speak to whether or not that would even be possible.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever actually will do that. I don't think we ever will spend time to do a very detailed kind of measurement study about what our impact is. For two reasons, is that our impact might be very small and very intangible very often, and it's just, how do you really measure that? I don't think you can measure that when we have those tiny little connections with our grantees. I mean, we have a Twitter account with 5,000 followers, and every single time we retweet someone, that's an impact, and maybe there are connections being made there. Every single time we have a conversation. I ran into Ottawa 123 at the gym yesterday. Maybe something will come out from that. So the amount of impacts that we can generate through Just Change, and 12 different members, even us, to be able to record every single interaction that we had with grantees and see that logical flow from that interaction, from Just Change, this is what happened, that attribution will be really hard. So that's the reason why I don't think that will ever happen. And also the other reason is we don't really have that capacity. As 12 individuals, we can't really do that study, although I would love to do that study if someone would like to hire me to do it.
Maybe our next research project once we have our executive
Exactly. I think it will be fascinating to have a look at 12 different people, different networks, different systems, different people talking to each other and creating impact in a community only from that beginning 1,000 grant. That will be fascinating. So yeah, I started from the negative but positive. I would love to do that.
Yeah, it's so many great questions here and the touch on some big issues. And I guess over time, I think we've gotten a little better at knowing what to watch for and what to watch out for, right? And I think that I think that a really good engagement between a nonprofit and a giving circle or group of citizen philanthropists like us is that there's an early relationship even before the investment decision is made, right? Where there are some internal champions, as we talked about, within our group, and that within their group, the nonprofit, that they have a really clear sense of what skills we have and what skills they could use, right? And who, and so there are a lot of worthy groups that have pitched us before and have amazing ideas and have amazing causes that in some cases people at our meeting will write checks to them or volunteer for them or be inspired by, but they don't end up being the investee because they don't come with a really clear sense of, okay, here are the sorts of things that we want to be better at, and we see that you have partners who have these sorts of skills, right? And then on our side, it's trying to work over time to make our partners better so that we don't have the, blundering, arrogant, well-meaning giver going in to tell the nonprofit what to do, right? That they're approaching it with, a sense of inquiry and appreciation and humility that I think is important to success. And so what we did is we formed a group called the Community Impact Committee within SVP, and so their job is explicitly to look at how each of the investee engagements is going and to kind of evaluate it and share the learning over time. So with hope we get better, but part of the fun of it is it's not perfect. It is a little messy, but over time we find that our partners get a lot of value from it, and the feedback we get from our investees is really positive.
With that, we might have time for just one more question, but we might only let you ask it to one of the organizations. So,
Well, actually, it's an observation. So one of the things I've noticed is nobody's talked about reseeding. So we're talking a lot about donations and your charitable giving, but I haven't heard anybody say anything about reseeding for tax purposes. Yeah. So so it's not like when we heard the presentation from, was it Angela? That was going to be my question in terms of giving circles. People just give; they don't care if there's a receipt.
Well, we do give charitable tax receipts for our donations, and so in our case, that's not a challenge, right? Necessarily, you know, it does create a certain administrative burden, but it makes it easier to ask people to open up their checkbooks. You know, one challenge for us is we have kind of a minimum donation, and everyone gives the minimum. Right? And so, you know, at some point we may need to look at a model that's a little bit different, right? So.
And we don't issue tax receipts. Our organization, when we first started, we were literally just 12 people. We've now formed a nonprofit, but still, we can't give out charitable receipts, and we don't plan on it. We are working on research that will hopefully show that tax receipts isn't as much of a motivator among the millennial generation, which we're trying to tap into for these networks. But it wasn't a driving force for any of our members, and it hasn't prevented us at any point in time. We were even able to engage in a partnership to spend someone else's $1,000 on a great idea, and the topic of tax receipt didn't even come up.
Yeah. And it will limit us to who we can actually give to by not being able to give tax receipts. The flip side of that is that we can give money to an individual, for-profit, not-profit, government, whoever we want to, whoever wants our money really and has a good idea, obviously. But that freedom has been very meaningful to us.
okay, with that, I've got regret to inform you that we've got to cut this panel short because we've got another one coming up, and we want to give everyone time for a break. So I just would really like to thank everyone here on the stage, and obviously Angela for participating today. I think we had an opportunity to learn a lot about giving circles and get some unique perspectives. So I think a round of applause for our panel.
Well, welcome back. Welcome to the second session. I'm Susan Phillips. I'm a faculty member and graduate supervisor of the Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership Program. As Paloma said in the introduction, what we tried to do with this session is to capture some of the emerging trends. And there are many emerging trends in philanthropy. But we've focused collectively on two of them. As you heard in the first, the move towards much more collective, engaged philanthropy, the role of millennials, and the importance of peer-to-peer learning that we know has become so significant in philanthropy. The trend that we want to tap into in this panel is around social investment. The encouragement of private capital, be it from individuals or corporates or big institutions like pension plans, to invest in the charitable nonprofit sector. And we want to ask some critical questions about that. Are those who engage in social investment the same people who are traditional philanthropists, or are they fundamentally different? And do they think about their contributions to social impact in different ways? Might social investment ultimately displace and take away from more traditional philanthropy because it holds out some promise of both a social return on investment and a financial return to the donor? And what are the synergies, and what are the role of intermediaries? So we've assembled another really interesting panel. Far right is Brian Toller, who many of you in this community will know. Brian is the owner of Tolcor Investments, so he is an investor, but he's also been chair of the investment committee of the Community Foundation of Ottawa when it moved into impact and responsible investing, sits on the board of Community Foundations of Canada, the Great Canadian Theatre Company, Hub Ottawa, and many other contributions as a member of the community and as a philanthropist. Welcome, Brian. Angela Dinzas is Regional Director of Alterna Savings. Again, many of you will know that Alterna has been a very big player in social investment and community engagement in a variety of ways. Her colleague Heather Simpson, also joining us from Toronto, and we're glad you beat the weather, is Director of Community Accounts at Alterna. Heather's worked in development strategies for social enterprises for many years. Has been a consultant to the International Finance Corporation that's very involved in financial inclusion, and again, a board chair in her volunteer capacity. We've brought back some of our Just Change group. We're so proud of them. You know, they started doing what they were doing when they were students the first year in our program. Mitch O'Cutney is one of our grads. He is the lead program advisor at CHIO, the foundation. He's a member of the leadership team of the Citizens Academy. You should see his blog. He does some great writing on charities and social enterprises, and he's a founder and board member of Just Change. And Reed Guernsey, also a member of Just Change and also a graduate of our program. He was actually my research assistant one time, a very good one. He's entered his career in government, at the federal government, has been part of the Accelerated Management Training Program, is currently an economist in Finance Canada, and has worked with the Centre for Innovative Social Enterprise Development, among many other community engagements. So a broad spectrum of thinking about philanthropy, engagement, and investment. Brian, let me start with you. What are your thoughts in this area?
Well, I wanted to put on my hat as a former board member and former chair of the Community Foundation of Ottawa and give you just a brief, almost a case study of the journey we went through in social finance, because and I'm still going to say we, although I did leave the board in December, but it was 10 years and it's hard to drop the we. And I see Barb McInnes here and BB here and other Community Foundation people, so I'm still sort of home. But I think the journey we went on and where we ended up is quite important. And so I'll just tell you a bit about that and how it may fit into the general conversation. Most of you know about the Community Foundation, but just a quick snapshot. It's a public endowment in the city of Ottawa with about $110 million in assets now. And we give away $5 to $10 million a year to about 500 charities in the Ottawa area. And it's one of about 200 community foundations across Canada, and there are about 1,800 globally. So our journey in social finance, we really entered into it in 2008-2009 period, trying to ask the question about how we can do more with our assets than simply invest money and make grants. We wanted to see how we could line up more of the assets to be in line with our mission. So the first step was to look at the endowment and introduce a responsible investing program inside the endowment. And then secondly, we, a few years later, launched an impact investment strategy, both in the endowment and outside of it. So I'll just go through that a little bit. Now, responsible investing is the term that's generally used now. It's been around for 20 plus years. It started out as ethical investing, then they called it socially responsible investing, and then the big pension funds didn't like the word social, so now we call it responsible investing. But it's the same idea that you're trying to take a more careful look at what you're investing in. And from a foundation point of view, it made a lot of sense. I mean, there we were giving out a $5,000 grant to a local environmental group with one hand and investing in the worst polluter in the oil sands in the other hand. And so we said, that doesn't make any sense. How can we line that up? So the approach we took inside the endowment with all of our security selection was a best-in-class approach. We didn't do the negative screening because we didn't feel like we had the resources. It's a small foundation with 12 staff, only a couple of people in finance, so we could, and a volunteer investment committee. We didn't want to get into picking who the good guys and the bad guys were. We thought it was better to have a best-in-class approach and ask our managers to select those investments in a particular sector that had equivalent metrics, but also were the better players in terms of environmental, social, and governance behavior and risk. That was That approach was inspired by the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment, if you've heard of those, UNPRI. 6 simple principles about incorporating, and ESG is the term I'll use, environmental social governance factors in your investment selection. Today there are almost 1,400 signatories to the PRI, representing about 60 trillion with a T in assets. And Community Foundation of Ottawa became a signatory to UNPRI, and we're the only community foundation in the country to do so. It requires us to report annually on our activities in this space. And I still have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to take a quick drink here because the voice will go otherwise. The other part of the responsible investing approach is proxy voting. We have asked our managers to use whatever responsible investment proxy voting service they have access to. We give them guidance every year or so. They report to us on how our shares are being voted, and we try to push them to vote them in ways related to executive compensation, corporate governance, environmental sustainability. Again, we have to take a kind of a hands-on approach. We don't have full-time staff on this, but it is a way to at least provide some guidance. And to me, that's part of the appeal of a best-in-class approach, because we remain asset owners. It's easy on the one hand to say, well, we're not going to buy those companies. And then you can sit back and say, there, we're good citizens. But you have no say in how they're performing, and someone else will buy their shares. And this way, at least, you're trying to pick the best players, and then in the areas where they're perhaps falling down, you work through managers to try and get them to disclose and be accountable and to improve their behavior. So I like that approach. Since we got into it, a number of foundations have gotten onto the divestment approach, where particularly at oil and gas, they've gotten right out of it. If they did that a year ago, they're probably very happy with their returns. If they do it today, I really wonder if that's a good idea. And so it does come down to, how do you match your social mission with your desire and your need to earn enough money to do the granting, which is what we're set up to do. And then it becomes market timing. So I'd rather stay involved in the best players. Responsible investing, has grown quite a bit. Between 2006 and 2013, Responsible Investment Association reports total assets increasing from about 450 billion to 1 trillion in Canada. And that's partly coming from demand from clients, and it's also partly coming from investment managers and foundation boards and committees who want long-term risk managed better. And then on the impact investing side, which we define as the active investment of capital in assets and organizations that have a social and environmental benefit as well as a financial return. So it's not an either-or situation anymore. I think there's a lot of data out there to show that that's really a myth, that you can do both. Someone said recently there's been a lot of interest in impact investing, sort of like high school sex. Everybody is talking about it, but very few people are actually doing it. Happily, CFO is doing some of impact investing, and our approach was to take 5% of our endowment and put it into market rate impact investments. And so at the moment, we're mostly involved in a fund focused on sustainability issues and mitigation of climate change in private debt infrastructure, timber, and agriculture. We're looking at deals right now in affordable housing and in green bonds. So all of these are just institutional grade, available to any pension fund or foundation that has obviously a demonstrable social environmental impact as well as a financial return. Outside of that, we've also have a target of 5% in what we call direct impact investing, which has the local piece to it. So we set up a separate fund. There's only a little over $1 million in it at the moment. It's focused currently on providing loans to charities, so debt financing for charities, which they use to buy real estate, to start social enterprises. We work with a financial intermediary, the Community Forward Fund. We're one of about 10 foundations that have contributed about $11 million to this fund. And they invest it in loans to charities at a rate around 5 to 7%, and then they pay us about 3%, and the margin is their cost of operation. And we made it optional for donors because it wasn't part of our original plan when they signed fund agreements. It is different. It is illiquid. It is a little riskier. So that's why we made it outside the endowment. It attracts a different kind of donor. And we have some donors who want to do only that and have no interest on the endowment side. And then we have others that want nothing to do with this, and they want to stick with the endowment or the flow through. And happily, we have a few major ones that love to do both. And so that's really great. The donors that are interested primarily in impact investing, they want to use all of their donation for impact now, excuse me, rather than have the funds in the endowment. They often have business backgrounds. They're used to achieving results now, and they're comfortable with innovative ways of doing things and like disruptive approaches. Impact investing is also actually growing quite a bit globally. According to the Global Impact Investing Network, there's currently about 60 billion now invested impact investments around the world. Among the leaders in the community foundation space, other than Ottawa, Hamilton and Edmonton community foundations have been doing very, very good work. The other sort of trends I'm seeing in impact investing in Canada are on the retail side. There's a lot more interest now in community bonds. The Centre for Social Innovation Toronto has been a leader in that, raising quite a bit of money. I think it's $4 or $5 million now for real estate for their change-maker spaces. Another good example in Ottawa is OREC, the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op. They've raised $5 million to buy and install solar electric facilities and pay a decent return, RSP eligible. That totally fits into the space. I think there's more of that to come. And then, of course, there's a lot of interest in social enterprise and social purpose businesses, and Hub Ottawa is a good example of that. And the millennials are really driving that agenda. There's other things we could talk about. We probably want to talk about Mark Zuckerberg and Gates and big money philanthropy there, but I think I'll pause it there, Susan, and we'll carry on.
Great. Thank you. And we'll come back to the question of what are donors versus investors thinking of what drives them, and are they fundamentally different, the same? Angela and Heather, you work with what we might call one of the intermediaries, the important institutions that match investments and community impact. So what are your thoughts in this?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us today. Thank you to Carlton, Susan, Mitch, and Just Change. What a great group of people. We love you, by the way. We really do. Heather and I are honored to be given the opportunity to participate in today's discussion and provide the credit union perspective. Credit unions have been leaders in social investment and community engagement. We've been around a lot longer than most people know. We've actually been around for over 100 years. Alterna Savings particularly was founded back in 1908, over 100 years ago. And it started with just a group of people, federal civil servants actually, led by Alphonse Desjardins, when money was not really that accessible, not like it is now. Back then, loans were as high as 200%, and people could not get access to it. So they decided to come together, pool their funds, and create a cooperative of sorts. So back then it was the Civil Service Loan Society, and since then it's evolved many times over, and here we are 106 years later, and we're Alterna Savings. So we're very proud of our roots. Credit unions have had a history of providing access to financial services, traditional financial services, particularly to the financially marginalized segment of the population. So although we are a for-profit organization, I often say we're for-profit but act like a not-for-profit, we are not, it's because we are not necessarily profit-driven, or at least not solely profit-driven. We have both economic and social goals that impact our local communities. So our credit union profits are reinvested in our members, which are our shareholders. So, and all of us are shareholders at the credit union, and we have an equal number of shares, one each. and 1 share gives you gives you 1 vote, and that forms our cooperative and democratic model. So our profits are reinvested in our members and our local communities in a variety of ways, including partnerships with local nonprofits, sponsorships, grants, financial education, and programs like microloans. Our community investment loan portfolio consists of microloans, social enterprise, and nonprofit lines of business. And the impact of these 3 programs can be measured and have been measured in a number of studies that we have conducted. And what we've seen over the course of the years is a better quality of life for many of our borrowers. It's led to job creation, better income, and enhanced community partnerships. And to allow the maximum number of individuals to participate in our program, we've developed important relationships with community organizations as well as with the province as well. So partnerships with not-for-profit social finance organizations to provide funding to aspiring entrepreneurs, social enterprises, internationally trained talent, who would not otherwise qualify for or have access to credit from traditional financial institutions. And partnerships with registered charities to provide individuals without collateral or credit history access to microloans. So I'm going to pass this on to Heather now, and she's going to try to give you a better understanding of the issues that we face from a credit union perspective.
And, Brian said something about impact investing, and when you were talking, there's so many different definitions and the changes and the words that have changed over the years. And I often like to say impact investing is a philosophy. It's not a thing. It's not a set of products or a set of actions. It's really a philosophy that guides what you do. And I think as Alterna, that is a big part of what we do. We look at the decisions that we make, and we want to make sure they're having an impact for our members, for our local communities as well. When we talk about impact investing for us, we also look at, and again, I think echoing Brian, how do we do this in a sustainable manner? And our definition of sustainable depends on the lens, that we're looking at it through. Some of what we do has to be, you look at the program, you look at the product we offer, you want to make sure that you're offering that product and it's coming back to you in a sustainable way. It's generating some sort of a profit, or at the very least breaking even in terms of your investment on it. What we do with our microloan program, when we've been doing microloans, last year we celebrated 15 years. We've done close to $3 million to entrepreneurs in the Toronto and Ottawa markets. We work very closely in Ottawa with the Ottawa Community Loan Fund. But the work we've done through that program as Alterna, if you just look at the budget line for that program, it's very hard to see that program is generating an overall sort of a positive return in terms of the cost of us delivering the program versus the revenues that we get from that program. But when we look at the impact that it has in the broader community, we've worked really closely with 3CI here at Carleton to evaluate and assess the impact of that program. And we see the impact that for an individual borrower of somebody taking a chance on them as they build their business, as that business grows, as that business flourishes into something, as that individual takes some education, is able to get credentials, and is able to grow in terms of their own personal wealth, their own financial security. When we start to extrapolate on those things, it becomes a very valuable investment for the credit union, because it's one where we're seeing our actual membership grow. And those numbers are hard for us to track. I think the
Just Change was talking the last time about, the cost of tracking and doing this, which is why we've partnered with groups like Carleton who are looking at these initiatives from an academic standpoint. They want to see the impact, they want to understand, and so we work really closely with those types of partnerships so that we can validate what we know, so that we can validate that, yeah, our program is making a difference. And then we share that information. Our microfinance program has been written up in a number of different publications. I think there's a couple books. There's a whole bunch of different pieces to what we do with that. I think the other thing that happens for us is that because we're well known in this space, and we're well known in Ottawa. In Toronto, in Ottawa, we were the Civil Service Co-op. In Toronto, we grew out of Metro Credit Union, which grew out of the university, and Unicol, which was the U of T faculty originally. So very left sort of leaning credit union. And there was another credit union that was eventually absorbed in sort of that, which was a group called Bread and Roses. Bread and Roses was a social justice, I see a couple of heads nodding. They were a social justice credit union. They got themselves in a little bit of trouble because they were focused on the social justice and the impact and perhaps not so much on the sustainability. And I have the privilege of, because so many people who work in the nonprofit space in Toronto were members of Bread and Roses, and they have these stories, and they see it, they know what they got themselves in trouble with. They know that they weren't paying attention to all of those pieces. But because we have this reputation, sometimes we are asked to do things that we can't deliver on. I think sometimes as an intermediary, we're asked to do more than we should be asked to do. Or we're often asked to take on more risk than we can do when we're stewarding our members' dollars. We have to protect our members' dollars. The people who bank with us want to make sure that the dollars they have on deposit with us are being leveraged for good and to impact the community, but they want to make sure that they're getting the dollars back too. And so we can't always engage in every type of initiative. And I think as the conversation gets further, I think this is one of the things that you'll see is that there are things that impact investing can't solve because some things don't generate a positive financial return, despite the fact that they generate a positive social return. So I will flip it over.
Thank you. So turning to this side, we hear lots of good things about impact investing and how it gives us more tools. You're in the micro loan business. You're in the micro business, although not using loans, but using grants. And we hear lots of things about millennials. This certainly came to the fore with the Zuckerberg-Chan gift, where it wasn't actually a gift, they invested it in a way in which they retain control. And so we hear lots of things about how millennials give in different ways and they like control. So are you going to defend more traditional philanthropy? Where are you going to take us, Mitch?
I am. You've already heard quite a bit about Just Change, so I'll keep my opening remarks brief, but I'll preface my comments in that I work in a sector that lawyers refer to as the MUSH sector. Municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals. And the common thread of my experience through these various organizations is that I've typically worked in some capacity in institutional funding, either on the grant making side or on the grant writing side. And so that combination with Just Change is where much of my comments originate from. I should probably also say that I am definitely an overly opinionated blogger with trust issues, particularly in things that maybe sound just a little too good to be true. And that is obviously the topic of our panel, which is social investment. And so I'll say this. Yes, I think that making investments that produce a profit, that don't rape the planet and destroy people's lives are a great thing. I think that is appealing to a lot of people, and that we should definitely move the investment side of things in that way. But I find it difficult to comment on the difference between an investor and a social investor when I think about companies like Twitter. Twitter has done remarkable things for democracy, for knowledge dissemination, for a whole slew of great outcomes that no charity could have probably accomplished any better. But no one would doubt that that it has been just an incredible benefit to society. If I invest in Twitter, am I a social investor? Can I don that cloak? And if so, what's the difference between a traditional tech investor that invested in Twitter because they saw excellent potential in the company? These are some of the issues that I battle with when talking about this. And so in that context, the area that I find most fascinating isn't so much the investment area or social investment, it's how this is influencing the nonprofit sector. It's what's happening in the sector looking to this space on what does this mean for us. And I'll save my comments for later on in the conversation about how I think that's influencing it and move on to Reed.
Okay.
You should have sat here, I think, and I should. Thank you, Susan, for having me aboard. I don't think it was that long ago when I was giving presentations for your class and writing papers on social impact measurement and social enterprise. And well, you were very merciful grading those papers, so I hope you're merciful with this panel.
Won't be on your transcript.
What's that?
It won't be on your transcript.
So, yeah, again, Just Change has certainly part and parcel why I'm here. Also, I'll just give you a brief sense of what CSED is, which is the Center for Innovative Social Enterprise Development, of which I'm the chair. I'm not super hands-on. It's not my day job. But it does give me a wonderful perception and idea about what's going on in social enterprise in Ottawa. It also allows me to carry forth that perception and flag when I go to Just Change meetings as well. So I love, maybe it's also because I'm an economist, but I love like seeing a perfect model, and I love seeing like a really good problem identified, which is the first question that we have for a Just Change application. And then a really good fit for how you can solve it, both sustainably, which is a key. It's not something we need, but having something that's a sustainable model that shows, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to us doing it over and over and over again, which continues the cycle. That's beautiful. Like, oh my gosh, I'm totally a champion for those kind of things. We've seen some really cool ideas where you have. I always go back to bumbrellas.
Yep.
One of our second grantees was an organization who works out of Equitable, which is a really well-to-do or well-done nonprofit organization for newly immigrated women in Ottawa. And they run an apparel workshop as well, where they design and develop their own styles and clothing and different kinds of things. And then they also, through the help of Equitable, develop the business skills to actually sell those products as well. So one of the ideas that one of this lady came up with is to take all the recycled umbrellas that were lost in OC Transpo buses, turn them into, cut them out, get some string, fasten them together to be bicycle seat covers, and then call them bumbrellas. And it was genius. I mean, it was such a great, you can totally see all these hipsters out there with these plastic bags. They would so much rather have a bumbrella on their seat than anything else. And it's a great, it's, especially in today's climate, right? So it's a marketable product. It doesn't take much capital to create, and it has a social benefit of allowing developing business skills for women. So this is why it's not always it's certainly something that I would be keen to invest in, and it's not something that I would request a market rate of return for, because I live in the area and I can see bumbrellas going around, and I know personally that is helping a good cause in my area. But I know also that it helps promote this sort of sense of sustainability, and when I give that $1,000 grant, when I give my money, I'm not expecting them to come back a year from now and request another grant. I know I have faith more. Or maybe, I would be more excited if they went to Brian and at CFO and at Alterna, and requested that next stage of development for them. So it's that development aspect, and I just wanted to land at the very end on the idea of a pipeline. So Just Change is one, at the very beginning, the very first idea that promotes this sort of social enterprise pipeline. And you start there, and it's almost like a triangle. There's many different ideas, all requiring tiny little amounts of money. And eventually, as those ideas form and either fail proudly or turn into something more marketable and sustainable, and eventually get up to very few but very large grants that will absolutely anchor a community with, I think of Causeway Work Center, which is a nonprofit organization that pulls in millions of dollars a year in revenue and supports people with barriers to employment, with all sorts of really genius sort of social enterprise programs. I think of Operation Come Home, which does a very similar thing for youth. I think of Group Convex, which pulls in also, it's staggering, but they all do so in a way that all the funding fits in perfectly with that sort of idea of a model. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'll stop there and you can ask me questions.
Great range. When we're talking about how social investment fits with philanthropy, does it matter the scale? So, Brian, you're probably dealing with much larger investors, those who were going to put in more than, with due respect, $50 a month, not to diminish that. But are they looking, do they have different calculus in mind? And what makes the social investment more attractive than the philanthropy? And can you convert them one way or the other? You said some are doing both, but how are they the same and different? And what does that mean for both philanthropy and social investment?
Well, to begin with, they're all starting in the same place in that they're wanting to create a better community. And so it's really a question of what tool do they want to use. And for some, definitely, it's pure granting. I mean, some of the donors at CFO don't use the endowment or impact investing. They just flow their money right through. And they're relying on the intimate community knowledge that CFO has to help guide them with their philanthropy, or to split a $100,000 gift into 10 smaller gifts. The ones who are interested in impact investing, first of all, let me step back. A lot more donors are now asking the question about, well, how is your endowment invested? I don't mind leaving money in the endowment and working with you to do the granting, but I am a bit curious about how is that money being earned? And so that's where our responsible investment lens is put on. We say, well, we're still doing traditional investing, but we're putting this ESG lens on everything and trying to have some kind of a social impact as a result of that. And I think donors like to hear that message. And the ones that jump right into the impact investing piece, I don't know, Bibi, you might be able to answer me better, but I tend to think that they're innovators to begin with. They might have deeper pockets, so they're willing to consider different kinds of things. They're very engaged in their community in a lot of different ways, and so this is just another piece for them. So they're leaders in many respects.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we addressed in the first panel was the notion of learning and working together and learning how to be better philanthropists, learning what works. In the work that you're doing, how is that learning taking place? And Mitch, you mentioned looking at it from the nonprofit perspective. But for example, the impact investors are those who are coming with an interest in investing in a co-op and possibly using that for microloans. Where do they learn for the process? Do you see any consistent trends in their learning and where they're learning from, what they want to know?
As you started asking the question, I immediately went somewhere and sort of wrap.
You can go somewhere else.
No. Like I'm trying to see how I bring it back to the end of your question. But I think we're seeing different pieces of learning in different places, and I think to like Mitch's point, like what's happening to the nonprofit sector as a result of all of this. And one of the things that Alterna is currently doing, we got some we're working with the Toronto Enterprise Fund, which is out of United Way Toronto, and they focus on nonprofit-based social enterprises similar to what's run out of Causeway or Echo Equitable or some of the other, or a lot of what Operation Come Home is doing in Ottawa. So programs that are running a business, but to help people who are facing barriers to employment to gain job skills. And one of the things, it's a grant-based program, so it's a philanthropic-based program. They're having an incredible challenge in that they can't move people off of the dependency of their grants, despite the fact that these are running social enterprises that have an ability to generate some revenue. So one of the things that we started to have some conversations, and when the province launched their social enterprise demonstration fund, we partnered with TAF around an initiative, we're calling it the Mixed Cap Fund, where we're trying to encourage nonprofits that have the ability to carry a loan to take out a loan. So there's a grant and a loan to this. So it's, you get a 50% grant, 50% of a loan. So there's some free money, and that's sort of the carrot, and then there's a loan component to this. And what we're trying to do is teach these organizations about how to look at their activities, how to look at their programs, and figure out what is the stuff that they're doing that is revenue generating, that can benefit from a loan, so that we're keeping the philanthropic focus on this stuff that probably doesn't qualify as an impact, like as an investment piece, as something that's generating a bit of a return. And so you see in that space that they're starting to get a lot more clever about how they run the financials. They're running the business costs on one side and the social costs on another. So the business costs is the need to have a manager, to have a workforce, to have your inputs and your supplies. The social side is the need to have a social worker. You wouldn't need a social worker except that you're working with this population. So you get a grant for the social worker, but the rest of the business ideally is operating in a way that's self-sustaining. So this is some of the pieces that we're trying to move for. As they start out, we know there's a need for grants, there's a need for those support, but how do you move them along that sort of trajectory into something that maybe has the potential for an impact investment, that somebody can get some sort of, that an investor can get some type of return on? Because as we know, there's an incredible amount, and something we haven't talked about is there's an incredible amount of impact investment dollars. There's and interest. It's very difficult to place it. Organizations struggle to find the investments to put it in. And so we have to, the nonprofit space needs to sort of move a little bit, and the impact world needs to accept a little bit, maybe less return or more risk to sort of marry the two, because I don't think they're operating in the same space yet. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but you sent me somewhere.
Important point. We're learning increasingly the problem isn't having access to the private capital, it's having the demand side built. Do you want to comment on that, Mitch, before we open it to questions?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead. Not that you know your opinions.
I definitely, exactly. I think it's. I like that you're trying to talk about a nuance, because I think that too often isn't addressed. Like there's this idea that social investment is sometimes looked at as this panacea that can just solve all of our world's problems. But I like to think, an example of an organization I used to work for, just to preface about where I'm coming from, and I think there are certainly private business solutions to existing things that charitable institutions are currently responsible for, that we should find a better way of divvying it up. But yes, absolutely, that there needs to be still grants and these things. But a great example I think of is an organization that, maybe I should ask, are there any job developers in the room? Excellent, because I'm about to rip them up. So this organization had two job developers, and then the program cost them about $150,000 a year to run, and they developed jobs for youth. And they did an evaluation of the program, and they found out that only maybe six, 7 jobs were created every year. They were typically not the highest meaningful paid employment. And they realized that had they just hired the kids to work on other programs in the nonprofit and not pay the job developers, they could hire more kids, have more meaningful impact, and everything's better and cheaper. I think that's a great example of self-reflection, that there are activities that the charitable sector can look at that maybe they shouldn't be doing. Operation Come Home, totally glad you mentioned them. That's exactly what they're doing. Rather than you doing job training, they're just giving kids plots of land and saying, well, why don't you farm and sell your veggies? And that teaches them a whole bunch of job development skills because they're running their own business. So, yeah, that would be like, I think that's great that you're nailing that. But to the point that I sort of skipped over earlier, that I think is abundantly important for everyone who is an advocate for social investment and that are driving this forward, is this influence that it's having on the nonprofit sector. And as someone who I've applied to a lot of grants on behalf of organizations, and I see where it's going. You know, I swear, just one day I woke up and every single charity suddenly became a social enterprise. Everyone was suddenly a social innovator and doing social things, and you know, the social portmanteaus seemed to be just flooding everywhere you went. And I just started to wonder, what does any of this actually mean? Are we really just talking this brand exercise rather than making meaningful change? Mm-hmm. And it might not be a causal relationship, but by de facto it is correlational, that at the same time the wave of social investment was occurring was at the same time that we saw the largest systematic elimination of core funding in the nonprofit sector, the shift to project-based funding that was precarious by nature, the 2008 financial crisis and the effect that it had on GDP, and even now more so, there's this idea that grants have these line items like matching funds, where every dollar you receive, you need to find a dollar in the private sector, and that there's many people even at this panel have used this word sustainability that I think grantors largely misunderstand, because it seems to be that you can give someone $600,000 now for 3 years, and somehow magically their sustainability plan is to continue doing it after the money is gone. I find this an absurd landscape that obviously faces major challenges by the sector, and so I think they looked to social investment as maybe this is what we need to do. Maybe this is the solution. And I'll end with an example that I feel always resonates with me is that I can promise you the Make-A-Wish Foundation will never be a social enterprise. Mm-hmm. But there is no one in this room that would doubt the value of granting the dying wish of a child who is leaving us all too soon. And so while we talk about social investment, I just like to remind people about there is this other glaring elephant in the room that I think we need to remember in the context of that conversation.
Thank you. What a great note to turn it over to you for questions, comments.
So just a quick reaction. In some of my courses, we talk about philanthrocapitalism, social investment, and I'm really curious what you answer to the critics, saying somehow you're using the tools of a system that produces what you're trying to address. So I'm just curious, how do you deal with that tension in your work or within your organization?
Well, I don't see this as an either-or situation where you're going to grant or you're going to do social investment. One does not replace the other. I mean, it's pretty well established that there is not enough money in the philanthropic sector and the government sector to do everything that we want to do. The needs are just so great. So why don't we harness the trillions of dollars of capital that's out there in a more sustainable way or a socially mindful way? So from my point of view, it's just adding another engine to what we want to do. But if it isn't done right, yeah, it could be damaging. But we can make it be done right.
The question back there, and then a couple at the microphone. Mary, does...
I don't need that.
Okay.
Mitch Reed and the other wonderful people from Just Change. I'm one of the 5,000 who follow you on Twitter.
Oh.
Joyce, by the way.
Oh, hi.
He's hilarious.
Great.
Bit of a provocateur.
Yes, you are.
I'm really, sorry, is anyone having a hard time hearing me like this? Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. I can usually fill the room with my voice. I'm really grateful that you addressed the issue of, giving us that example of the Make-A-Wish and, not denying a dying child their last wish. Are you familiar with Greystone Foundations? Greystone Bakery? Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Yeah. Anyone know Ben and Jerry's ice cream? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Greystone Foundation, Greystone Bakery, makes the brownies and the cookies for Ben and Jerry's. They're located in Yonkers, New York, and their whole raison d'etre is they do not hire people to bake brownies. They bake brownies to hire people. And they started as a very small initiative in Yonkers, New York, trying to help out those who were less fortunate, the homeless, the addicted, and has grown into a large-scale foundation based on the fact that they've developed this great product. Everything that they make goes back into the social aspect of their business. This is some of what is fueling some of this social impact investment, is this idea that you can do this. I believe that there is a place for social investment, and I get confused about the language. Is it social investment? Is it social impact investing? Is it impact investing? Is it sustainable investing? There's been a lot of language throwing around about it. And then there's B Corp. For anyone, I don't know if everyone knows what a B Corp is, but it's the revenue-generating component of the nonprofit. And everything from the revenue-generating component under the B Corp is supposed to go back into the nonprofit. Am I correct?
There's a difference between B Corp in the States and B Corp in Canada, but yeah, sure, the point is made, yeah.
There's some new governance. Yeah. So I'm grateful to hear, all of the panel's experiences and ideas about, how to proceed through this. But I was also really grateful to hear you sort of poke the balloon.
Oh, thank you.
Just wanted to thank you for that.
Let's take a couple other questions. There's some questions here. Yeah.
I might try this out.
You're on.
How do I properly? I'm a trustee of a donor-advised fund at the Community Foundation, and I hear your frustration. I think philanthropists or donors want to be charitable in their work. However, they also realize that they're going to run out of money solving a problem. So I think the tools that are playing out now in all sorts of cities are one of those, and to explain this properly, but one of the tools that we can use. And I think we're at a tipping point, actually, because our focus is homelessness. And I feel very frustrated by the lack of affordable housing in a city such as Ottawa. And I think there are a lot of people in Ottawa who have the resources and would be completely satisfied with receiving 2 or 3% return, knowing that their money would be supplying housing at affordable prices in an economy that's just gone crazy. So I think it's interesting that these two panels, I kind of realized that the two panels are very, very different. One is talking about charity and innovation and ideas coming up from the bottom up, which is great. And this one is talking about tools that we can use in the economy to create or to help with a solution to a problem. because the gap between the rich and poor is getting wider and wider, and charitable dollars are not going to fill the gap. So we have to keep trying these tools out and keep experimenting.
Yeah.
Not really a question, but
I'm going to turn it over to the panel, but that's a really useful way of putting it. And maybe it was Reed's metaphor of a pipeline, because part of what we were trying to get at with this panel was the question of, we have a new variety of tools or an application and an interest in using a new variety of tools alongside more traditional grant making. And how do we find the right connection and range and that pipeline of moving from and complementing the use of those tools, so that ultimately putting them all together, perhaps in different ways, we're achieving a greater good, knowing that philanthropy alone won't take care of this. But Heather, did you want to jump in, and then we're one of you?
I hear, you're talking about housing, and I've certainly been involved in some conversations recently around housing, but I think what we need to see a little bit more of is better collaboration between the philanthropists, the impact investors, the financial intermediaries, or whoever that is, and government. We tend to do these things in isolation. Community bonds were built within the nonprofit space, and there's a legal opinion that, these should be RSP eligible, but there's no, from the financial institution's perspective, it's next to impossible to offer that as a product in a way that they're not losing dollars, because they're not publicly traded. They don't work the same way as other bonds. There's a different risk factor around that. They're not, so there's all these pieces, and we're all talking at each other, but we're not having a conversation right now. And I think to Brian's point about high school sex, that's really what's happening. There was a report earlier this week talking about the payday loan issue, and it called for specifically that, for better collaboration between the financial intermediaries, the nonprofit space, and government, allowing the financial intermediaries to do what they do best. Government maybe takes a role in de-risking some of the things that the financial intermediaries are a little bit nervous about. And then you have the nonprofit sector who is very good at the service provision and knows the people who are benefiting from these things. But unless we find a way to bring it all together and have those conversations, I think we're spinning in our wheel. So I think your point is well made.
A quick final comment. We need to wrap up soon.
Sure. So I totally agree with what you're saying, with one minor caveat. As long as these new financial instruments are expanding the pie and not repurposing existing envelopes that used to support the sector elsewise. And there is this expectation that has been present in the social investment dialogue. I remember there's the Monitor report that's now done by Monitor Deloitte that talked about the pioneer gap, that they said philanthropists should fill the risk gap so that social investors would bother to make the investment. That irked me, because I think it's silly that philanthropists should have to make donations so that other investors will support a good cause. And so that's my only caveat, and also just to contextualize my comments, I would focus more on public funders rather than individuals giving. I think that's to each his own how people think they should give is their choice. Great comment, though.
Reed, do you have any final comments you want to make on this before?
No, it's certainly one of in the panel preamble was this idea of should it be substitute or a complementary form of philanthropy to social investing to philanthropy, and of course, yeah, absolutely, it should be complementary. It's just another tool in the toolbox. The idea of whether or not it takes from one source of funds or not. For public funders, yes, absolutely. For a philanthropist, it's entirely the person's choice, and whatever they feel, I think, should be should be up to those sort of individuals alone, how they see the problem and how they see the solution, what tool they want to choose from. It's certainly a CFO is a testament to that. Some people just want to do impact investing. Some people want to do charitable activity, and both have to stay together and on top of it and at full capacity. But yeah.
Angela, you want to make final comments?
Sure. I mean, I've been listening to everyone, and I understand like there's that great debate, between social investment versus philanthropy. I think there's room for both. I don't distinguish one from the other. I can give you a perspective, like from the credit union. I'm frontline. I face our members every day. The challenge we face day to day is offering our members that increased financial return, right? Lower prices, best in market rates, and the social impact. The struggle we're facing is with some of our memberships, when we've done surveys with them, the social impact piece is becoming a diminishing factor. And I'm out in the community a lot, so I see where our dollars go as a credit union, and I see the impact that we're able to make on everyday people, whether it's through a financial literacy seminar that tells them how to do their banking. You'd be surprised, a lot of individuals do not know how to bank. They don't know how to use a financial institution. They do not know how to maintain good relations with a financial institution. They do not know how to reduce fees that they pay at a financial institution, and there are ways to reduce fees. So I struggle with that at times, but then again, I see it as a tremendous opportunity, because we talk about, where do we put our money? Do we give as, do we just donate our money as philanthropists, and I'm sure many of us do, or do we want to invest it? Well, credit unions offer that amazing, opportunity to do both. Like, it's about us pooling our money together, and credit unions donate, and they invest, and they do all of those things. And, I often find it challenging when I meet with particularly not-for-profits and other cooperatives. They don't bank with a cooperative and credit unions, and they bank with larger financial institutions that don't necessarily have the same values. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity, particularly with millennials, because I am finding with that particular generation, they want a voice. They want a say in how organizations run their business, particularly their financial institutions. They want a say, and credit unions offer that choice. And I see an opportunity to collaborate with amazing people like those that are part of Just Change and various other organizations across the city, which I've had the pleasure of working with. And together, we can make that change and make a positive impact on the community.
Ryan, final comments of where social investment vis-a-vis philanthropy is going, and how
I guess I restate my point that this is just a huge area, and it doesn't have to be siphoning off government or philanthropic dollars. It's a leverage piece. When you think that the 200 community foundations in Canada have $4.5 billion in assets, the private foundations have, borrow about $20 billion in assets. So there's $30-40 billion in assets that can be purposed much more closely to mission. That's a fair chunk of change. And if you add on top of that, trying to do at least ESG screening and a bit of mindfulness about how the rest of our pension money is invested, you're talking trillions. And so we can just plant that seed and run it through the system. It could be enormous, even though we have to build capacity in the nonprofit sector and so on and so on. But I just think this is a wave, and it's coming, and we need to embrace it and make it work. It'd be quite powerful.
Please join me in thanking all of the panel and thanking you. Thank you for joining us. Part of our mandate with the program is to have these kind of conversations where we give an opportunity to really hear what's going on in the community, to engage with scholarship, and to see all of our our friends of the program, our alum, and our students back here. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you at our next event. Probably we're guaranteed one the end of May, which will be our annual session, but we'll send you all notices in advance. Thank you.